Thank you all for coming. A decent turnout before 7 o'clock for once in the Punjabi community. But we'll still be having some latecomers arrive, so don't be too kind of disturbed by anyone shuffling through or past you. So the Sikh Press Association has set up this event today. Sikh Press Association is an organisation that works between the Sikh community and the media. We're powered by Everything 13. They're a Sikh educational charity that also run projects like Basics of Sikhi, Mighty Khalsa and Kidney Sangha. Now, as far as I'm aware, today you're all at a historic event because this is the first ever Sikh community hustings. However, political discussions have been part of the Sikh community all the way back to the time of Guru Nanak Dev Ji Maharaj. I once heard a speaker say that during the time of Mughal Emperor rule in India, there were many religions with huge followings, just like Sikhi. So what made the Mughals so opposed to the Sikh faith that they sought to eradicate us? It was the fact that the Sikh faith has a clear political doctrine within it, and that forces us to challenge governance which contradicts our way of thinking. Now, just like any connected community, the Sikh community have areas of similar concerns. So when we're talking about things like genocide or the genocide of 84 or Gurdwara rights, these are things that only impact the Sikh community. So this is why it is important to have a Sikh community hustings. This is something that other communities have been doing for decades. Communities like the Jewish community and the Muslim community have been doing them since at least the 80s. And groups like the Muslim community actually do hustings all across the country, and this is the only one the Sikh community is having here today. So we do hope to replicate that and have more in the future. I'd like to make it clear also for the people that are taking part that none of them have been paid. They haven't even asked to have their train fares reimbursed, or yet. So, I mean, we should thank them for the seva of taking part today, because it is a seva to engage the community in discussion, and that's what we're here for a community discussion. One thing I do have to say is that we did think this event was important enough that when we were turned down by several organizations in terms of hosting it, we thought we're just going to have to go out and pay for a room ourselves. As an organization which is funded by a charity, we do rely on donations to continue to function. If you've received a pamphlet, one of our handouts, there will be information about donating there. So if you do think it worthwhile, please do contribute in any way you can. And I think we have some buckets here, possibly outside, that you can contribute in terms of cash. Now, the questions that will be posed to the panelists, firstly, they've been brought to us by people that have messaged us online, or people that work for other Sikh organizations as community figures that have said these are kind of the important questions that they would like answered within the Sikh community. One question that you won't find among the questions that will be asked by our host to the panelists is about the lack of Sikh MPs. Why? Is because it's very obvious how we can get Sikh MPs now, given there's a general election in a couple of days. Basically vote for them if you want. But a more pertinent question would be why we need a Sikh MP, which is something that we should hopefully come to an understanding about today, and that's why, or if actually. So before I let the fun start, I just would also like to make another thing clear. Should you go through kind of social media pages, I'm on Twitter, some of the panelists will be, there'll be some very obvious political allegiances. However, Sikh Press Association is an apolitical organisation. My personal views do not dictate what the organisation does. We have an advisory board and a management committee which kind of vets everything we do, and they're made up of people with differing views and diverse kind of political allegiances. In this day and age, there isn't a person working in media who is on social media that isn't giving some sort of commentary on politics. And to summarize, basically, if LBC can hire Katie Hopkins and still be regarded as a respectable media outlet, then the Sikh Press Association shouldn't be tarnished if I am out there talking about my support for Jeremy Corbyn. Now I'm going to hand over to Abdot, who's another person who's made his own political allegiances clear on social media, but this hasn't stopped him becoming one of the most highly regarded authorities on immigration in the UK. He's also one of the Punjabi Sikh community's most respected TV and radio hosts. He has his own TV show which goes out to thousands every week across approximately 50 countries. and he was also recently the week-long host of the BBC Big Debate radio show, which is why we considered him the ideal person to host this. So once again, thank you all for attending. I hope there's something that you can take away from this. I'm going to pass on to our host now. Oh, sorry, one more thing. We're on Facebook Live. If you want to share it, go to the Basics of SikhPA Facebook page and share the link with friends, family, anyone else that might want to watch.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Thank you, Jasveer, for the introduction. It may look like as if we're sitting here waiting for shuggins, but we're not. Last time I've done this, I got married. Still paying for it. But the only shuggins that these people are after are your support and your vote today, and we're here to hear their views and the questions which we've been selected by the audience and been selected by the Sikh PA about themselves. Now we're going to go and ask our panel to introduce ourselves. Some highly respected members here, some people who've travelled a long way to be here to share their views. So we'll start with Kulveer.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Hi, good evening everyone. Firstly I want to thank the Sikh Press Association for hosting this Hustings. I know I'm a last minute substitute, but very, very proud to be here at this first Sikh Hustings, and I think it's the first one of the campaign we were sort of working out.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's a historic moment, and it's a moment that we should think about what it means to be Sikh in modern Britain. I think that's what's driven us all here, or that's what drives us to be either politically engaged, listen to the debate, listen to what's happening, not just within the society that we might live in. You know, that Gurdwara community, our friends and family, a lot of cousins, a lot of rishtedar, that's the world that we probably all grow up in and we spend a lot of time in. But over the years, as our communities have spent more time in this country, we've grown, we've matured, we've become part of Britain, part of a modern Britain. We go into every part of this country, every society, every public service, every established institution we have a stake in, because this is our country. Especially, I think I'm looking around this room and I see most people are probably, is everyone who wasn't born in the UK? Anyone here who wasn't born in the UK? One or two. But majority of people are born here. Yes, we have strong ties to India, to the Punjab, and especially to our culture that we carry around with us like a beacon. But we are British and we are Sikh, and we're proud of that. And so my view today is I'm here to represent the views, yes, of the Conservative Party, but really to listen about what you feel is valuable to you, and maybe try to clarify some of, shall we say, that fake news that's out there, some of the stuff that we see on social media, some of the long-heralded myths that exist about, you know, well, he must be a Tory, he's wearing a waistcoat, you know. You know what? I used to get told off for wearing a waistcoat by the chairman of the Conservative Party because I was trying to be a Tory. I said, no, Francis Maud, I've worn a waistcoat since I'm 2 because I just think I like them. So it's got nothing to do with being a Tory. So debunking myths, clarifying the message, answering your questions, talking about what's important, and what's important is this general election. Because you've got a huge opportunity, every single one of you, to vote in this election. And if there's one thing I want you to take away from today is please vote. Another thing I'll be trying to do is convince you to vote for the Conservative Party. It's a real important moment, and hopefully we can explain why, because you know what, it comes around every few years, but nowadays seems to come around more often than others. But this time, with the amount of issues, whether it be Brexit, whether it be our homeland security, whether it be trade of this country, whether it be how do we sustain public services for the future, how do we make an economy that gives us world-class public services, those are the questions that the next government will be answering. And I hope to answer them for you.
Thank you very much, Kulveer. And Bally?
Okay. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Yeah, my name is Bally Singh, and I'm from the Midlands, a Warwickshire kid from Coventry. I'm a parliamentary candidate for Kenilworth and Southam constituency. Like Kulveer, I totally agree. This general election is a refreshing general election, actually, because it's one about the issues. There's a clear choice now between the main political parties. I would describe that choice as more of the same. It's quite divisive, but there's not much hope for the future. And a radical transformational manifesto from the Labour Party, which really talks about making Britain work for all of us, not just the few. So I think, it's refreshing. We've had politics that has been centred around the middle for too long, and people have said there's not much difference between one politician and another. And I think there was some legitimate concern around that. And the fact that we have got a real difference and a real choice, it's enlivened political debate. In some parts it has made it a little bit more tribal and a little bit more divisive. But I think in general, the clarity of political debate is refreshing and good for our democratic health. Now, as I was just talking to Shamsher about, identity. How do you see yourself? How do I see myself? I'm pretty relaxed about how I see myself. I'm obviously a Sikh lad from Coventry, a Sikh lad, from the Midlands. I am, a Labour politician, socialist by perspective in terms of my ideology. But it's fairly pragmatic. The main thing for me is getting things to work and working with people and trying to understand from one another, I guess, empathising with each other and trying to understand how we can work together to get things done. So that's quite important for me personally. I've got a fairly sort of relaxed attitude about myself and how I see myself in terms of identity. I think identity politics has become more prominent recently. And I think that's great because it has enhanced freedoms in the personal space. But I may be a minority in this room, but I do think there's a concern with some of the identity politics that we've lost some of that community cohesion and some of the class consciousness, which has really driven movements for change throughout world history. And I think when we unite, we've got far more common with each other than we have in terms of differences. When we unite, we are, as humanity, a powerful force for change. There's nothing more powerful, than people getting together and making that change happen. So we see a little bit of that, currently with the Labour Party. I don't know if it's going to happen on June the 8th. It may happen. It's closer than people thought. Obviously, I really hope it does happen. I'll be so happy if we do get that change and a new beginning. But let's see what happens. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
And our final panelist, Shamsher Singh.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. My name is Shamsher Singh. I'm a spokesperson for the National Sikh Youth Federation. I pretty much disagree with everything that's been said, so it's going to be an interesting debate. I don't consider myself a modern Sikh. In fact, I reject this notion of modernity because I believe it has roots in our oppression and it has roots in colonialism. And I also reject this notion of Britain being my country because the experience I've had with Britain has been a very difficult one. And this notion that's presented that by engaging with the state through a political party, whether it's the Tory party or UKIP or Labour, that we will somehow achieve something that will benefit humanity. As Sikhs, we should understand the position that the Guru has given us, that we are political by our nature. Politics for us isn't about the general election on the 8th of June. Politics for us is about our very being. We connect with humanity by the way we exist and the values that we hold. And those aren't dependent on a political party or the state. I'm going to present the complex questions here today for you. What do we gain by gaining a vote, and what do we lose, right? What do we turn our backs on in order to enjoy our democracy? These are complex questions that as Sikhs we're forced to look at every single day through our Gurbani and through the way we connect with the Guru and through the way we experience society as minorities, as dastar-wearing Sikhs, as an extremist. That's how people would see me, or a Muslim, right? So I'm very conscious about the fact that my identity means that people make judgments about me before I even open my mouth. And the state, in fact, perpetuates those notions, and they perpetuates Islamophobia and this kind of divide between people. That we can only be part of uniting with humanity if we're part of a political party. Whereas I say, as a Sikh, we are part of humanity, and it's our job as Sikhs to keep the state in check and keep political parties in check with an ideology that's based in divinity, and it's never going to compromise based on a politician or a party's position. Thank you. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Right, now you've heard everyone's introductions. Let's just explain the format to you. It's going to be a bit like BBC Question Time. So we're going to ask a question, and all three panelists are going to answer one by one. Then you yourselves will have a chance to ask further questions about it, and you can ask specifically or generally to the whole panel, and they can respond back to you, or in fact they can respond to each other. Right, no tutu manners, no twadipu adda and all that, right? They are now nice and calmly, with respect. Yeah. We'll save that for the Gondor elections. All these questions have been chosen by the Sikh PA based on suggestions given to us. So, without further ado, let's ask the first question. The first question: do Sikhs need a public independent inquiry into UK government involvement in 1984 Operation Bluestar? So once again, do Sikhs need a public independent inquiry into UK government involvement in 1984 Operation Bluestar? Let's start off with Kulveer.
Well, firstly, we can't forget Operation Bluestar. I can't forget it. I'll tell you why. Because I was in India in 1985. I went to Amritsar. I still saw the blood stains on Harmandir Sahib. I saw the bullet holes. I was 10 years old. And I was in Delhi when the curfews were on because my family, friends and relatives couldn't go out after 9 o'clock because they were still scared. We lost thousands. It was horrible, and it can't be forgotten. Now, the question is about the role of the UK government and its involvement in this. And as soon as those papers came to light a few years ago, David Cameron, then Prime Minister, asked the Cabinet Secretary, Jeremy Hayward, to do an inquiry into this. Now, I think there was something like 23 or 26,000 documents that they went through to examine to see if there was a relationship. And I think most people in this room are probably quite well read on this subject and will know that, when the Foreign Secretary at the time, William Hague, stood up in the House of Commons, he said that there had been a sole person sent to advise 6 months beforehand at the request of the Indian government. It was discretionary advice. And the fundamental basics of that advice was don't do an attack on Harmandir Sahib. That was and this is what the Foreign Secretary said in Parliament to Parliament after that report. Now, I know there's been some further evidence put forward after that in recent times, and that's been looked at as well, and that's been said that that's not related to that operation. So, where do we get to? I think what we're trying to do is maybe two things. We're trying to reassure us, Sikhs, about the role of the British government and its relationship with the Indian government at the time on something that devastated us as a community. And yes, I think we should still ask the question. Let's get to the bottom of it. If we are not happy, if we still want answers, then let's ask a question again. So I would say, yeah, let's have a further inquiry, get to the bottom of it, understand if there is any issue, any stone left unturned, and then put that to bed. And then let's move on and remember those people who lost their lives there and not forget about what happened and the tragedy.
Bally?
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree with much of what Kulveer said. I mean, it was a tragic event. I mean, I was very young, but I do remember the scars that we all felt, in households up and down the country when the attack on the Golden Temple happened from Indusab. And then obviously the communal conflict and the attacks to the Sikh community in the Punjab, especially Delhi, in terms of the news reports. I mean, horrific events, absolutely horrific. In terms of the inquiry, I mean, I don't really want to make this a political issue because it isn't really. It's, I think, from a Labour Party position, we do support a independent investigation into the events of UK involvement. We do feel the Hayward inquiry was insufficient. Sorry, my phone keeps going off. Yeah, we do feel the Hayward inquiry was insufficient. I think there was some concern about some papers going missing. So we feel we just need to bring it all on board in terms of confidence with an independent inquiry. Now, I would love this to be a cross-party independent inquiry. So, Kulveer said, let's ask questions, more probing questions about what happened. I think the concerns are that during that time, and the government at that time was the Thatcher government, there may have been, some links with military arms sales with the Indian government at that time, totaling somewhere around the figure of £800 million. And whether that had an influence on the government of the day in terms of how strong they were in opposing the attack on the Amritsar. So, yeah, fully support an independent inquiry. That's the Labour Party position. I've said it's the Labour Party position, and I guess it's not the Conservative Party position, but really this is not political at all. I think there's people from all parties who want an inquiry on behalf of the Sikh community, but on behalf of democracy in general, because our democratic health for all communities is improved if we have faith and transparency in the political process. So that's the way forward, really.
Shamsher?
I personally, I don't think we need an inquiry into the role of the UK government in Operation Bluestar, because we already know the role of the UK government in Operation Bluestar. Dr. Sangat Singh in his books, The Sikhs in History, talks about not only British involvement, but Russian and American involvement in his book. So we are already aware of the role of the state. And if we think this is something that's in the past, right, that the role that the British government are going to investigate of themselves is the fact that they provided military advice to the Indian government in order to help them raid Darbar Sahib and assault one of our holiest Sikh centres, the Akal Takht. It's something the government does today. It sells arms to Saudi Arabia. In fact, there's been editorial in The Guardian today about the government's position on terrorism and how they actually perpetuate the problem that they're trying to resolve. So the government is always going to sell arms to those people, its allies that have power. And this is what Gurbani tells us, right? When Gurbani critiques the role and the nature of the state, this is what it tells those people that have power. They will do anything to maintain that power, whether it's murdering innocent civilians in 1984 in Punjab or Saudi Arabia or Yemen today with arms sales to Saudi Arabia. So we know how the state's going to respond all the time. And I think it's quite a presumptuous thing that the government wants us to lobby them to do an inquiry to tell us what happened to us. I just find the whole thing quite frankly preposterous. And the fact that the candidates can say, or the Labour Party Conservative, they can say it's not a political issue because they don't want to take political responsibility for the issue, right? You've got to understand what the political language is here. So I think we already know what's happened. And let's not forget the government's position on this already. They released the papers that we're now petitioning them to release again, because when they released them, they withdrew them. And they censored the papers, and a whole bunch of papers were missing from the archive as well. So I know it's laughable. I find it quite frankly ridiculous. This is why I don't vote, and I don't think we should vote or place any faith in political parties or the state to resolve Sikh issues. Thank you.
Audience members.
For Kulveer, it's good of you to say yes, but how come I think you're probably the only Conservative that would say yes in regards to an inquiry? How come it's a kind of cross-party position to not have an inquiry, public independent inquiry?
Well, I don't think it's a party position not to have the inquiry, but I think we need to lobby to have the inquiry if that's what the Sikh community wants. And that's what the point of these hustings and these elections. And I know Shamsher is saying, why are we going to ask the government for this? And the government has power and it will retain its power. But the power the government has is what we, or politicians have, is what you decide to give them right now. And this is a time to ask for things, because this is the time they're willing to listen. So if we want to say we want an inquiry, want to be reassured as a community about what happened, again, we're not satisfied, we should say, we have two Sikhs, turban-wearing Sikhs, the star-wearing Sikhs in the House of Lords. They should be asked to pose those questions as well. We have some representation. We should ask your local MP, as I think the Sikh Federation has been doing, to say, ask for this. Ask. Let's ask. Let's use our power. I don't want to say that we don't have any power and the government has power and they use it, so we'll stand away from that. It's our power that we give to them. When we give it to them, let's ask what we want. That's why I say we should ask.
Just wanted to thank everyone for making the time to be here, and obviously the Sikh PA. I come from a Sikh Federation background. I'm actually very close to this. I worked with Phil Miller to go through all the archive files just last year, and some of the things that are in there are damning. I even quote, SAS advice would be valuable. And that's not in the run-up to 1984 in June, that's subsequently after, with regards to establishing the National Security Guard, etc. So when Jeremy Haywood did his review, the feeling is, given that that note, that quote comes from the 3rd of July, David Cameron's investigation, Haywood's review, was almost deliberately narrow, and that's the problem we have here. I think it's the case that clarity has not been gleaned from the review that's been conducted. And I think as stakeholders, as British taxpayers, regardless of political allegiances, we need the truth. And also, just to touch on Jasveer's question earlier, I think the Sikh Federation's got 40 Conservative MPs who are backing, a public inquiry. So I think the notion that, I think at the higher levels of Conservative governance, the front benchers, I don't think there's an appetite for this at all, because it's counterproductive based on Brexit and obviously the pressure on trade that there inevitably will be in the next 2 to 5, 10, 15 years. It's a phenomenal problem, I believe, that's upcoming. So I can understand that position that they have, but clearly this is an issue that has dragged on far too long, and from a Sikh perspective, this has to be nailed down and dealt with without compromise, because it leads on to bigger issues. As we've seen overseas, we have a fundamental problem where we cannot get justice at all. De facto, justice on this issue is not accessible in India. It hasn't been for 33 years.
Amen.
My question is to both parties. If they do an inquiry and we find out that the British did do something, so what? What do we do then? What's the point? And then what would be the point of an inquiry?
Well, I think, to answer that point, let's say if we, Labour's saying, let's have that inquiry, let's have it wide-ranging. I think Sikh Federation have been involved in influencing our position on that through the Faith Manifesto and the work of Tom Watson MP. And the idea is have this wide-ranging recommendation, cross-party in nature, inquisitive, that looks at the issues in full with confidence of various stakeholders, including you guys and Sikh Federation and other parties involved, and come up with some considered recommendations. And it's then upon those recommendations that the government is obliged to act. So those recommendations, we're in the world of hypotheticals here, but for example, it could be transparency in terms of arms deals. If there are any concerns about arms deals that had an effect on decision making, recommendation is let's have more transparency on arms deals and the relationship with foreign policy. I think there are some concerns in terms of even today now the effect that our trading relationship with some regimes, particularly in arms sales, is having on our foreign policy, and that's having some domestic impacts as well, which we all know about. So I think that's just one example, but I think the key is have confidence in the process, and that means it has to be inclusive, engaging, cross-party in nature. So the confidence in the process, recommendations, and then how do you act on those recommendations? So it's not just like a whitewash or it's put under the carpet. Continued scrutiny from all parties involved to make sure any recommendations are acted upon. But we have to get to first base in terms of this process, so we need that independent inquiry. Like I said, the Labour Party do support that. We'll have an independent inquiry that's wide-ranging. So if that's an important issue to you, I think in terms of this election, you know what to do. But actually, I'm gonna sort of counteract that and say, look at other issues as well. Look at your health service. Look at prospects for jobs. Look at education. All of these issues are vitally important, and depending on how you prioritise them, that will impact on your decision to vote. So there's loads of other issues, and I accept this one, particularly in this forum, is a key issue. But look at the wider range as well.
Shamsher, what's your?
I just want to say on that, that's an excellent question, and that's the question I would ask to all of you that are gathered here today and the wider Sikh community. What changes when we discover the full extent of Britain's role? What changes for you personally? Is that the final straw for you, that you knew Britain is fully involved and they offered advice and arms to the Indian government to attack your own people and your Gurdwara? Is that is that for you the point now that you say this is enough, right? So we ignore the Bengal famine in which Churchill saw 14 million Bengalis die. We kind of passed the point of partition where 13 million Sikhs, Punjabis, Hindus, Muslims died. And now it's this inquiry that's going to give the answer, or we then wait for the legislation that's going to correct what the inquiry told us. Meanwhile, the arms sales are going to continue, and they're going to continue after the legislation's passed again, and then we're going to have to fight that new environment. Then it's going to be the next government, the next party, the next legislation. That's what this process, the state process, gives you. As a Sikh, we reject that because we're about the here and now. Sorry?
Let them speak. Let them speak.
So for us as Sikhs, it's about the here and now. It's about taking control, right? Miri and Piri. For us, our spirituality and our politics they're not separate things, or they're not two parts of the same whole. They're intrinsically linked together.
But
they are the one and the same thing.
You know our policy. Jeremy Corbyn is advocating a more a policy based on peace and justice. So, you know, we're looking at having a minister for peace. We're looking at having scrutiny over some of our arms sales and how that impacts on our foreign policy. These are some of the things that, you know, you talk, and then on one hand you say this is an issue, you've got a legitimate grievance, but then on the other hand is you pull back from engaging and influencing. I mean, my own thoughts is there are legitimate grievances out there for all communities, whether you're Sikh, Muslim, all communities out there. The white working class, for example, has huge grievances in terms of opportunities and ownership over their own lives and communities. What we need to do is turn those grievances into positive action, because if we just stay in the world of grievances, nothing happens.
I agree.
You need to be quite visionary about that. So you need to use that as energy, but turn it into positive energy in terms of change and activism, and that's how we can get.
And I'm saying, put that positive energy. Don't invest that in a political party. Put that into yourself, into your community, into community grassroots organisations, because that's where the change is going to come from.
I completely agree with you in terms of established political parties, and Kulveer will also believe this as well. There does need to be change and reform in political parties. I think, you know, there does need to be more democratic accountability and health in political parties. The Labour movement, as you know,
when's that going to come?
So the Labour Party is the largest mass membership party in the Western world. It's over half a million members. And as you know, there's been a tension, well documented, between Parliamentary Labour Party and the wider membership. But I think recent events have shown, whatever happens on June the 8th, that the party is going in the right direction. And a lot of that is down to democratic accountability and people getting involved in the process and creating that massive change. Otherwise, you would not have had this radical manifesto. If it weren't for people getting involved, you would not have had this radical manifesto, which is promising change, positive change for the future. That's what people power can do, and political parties need to recognise that and start getting more involved in terms of people influencing and changing for the better.
Right, we're going to move on to our next question. So, anybody with
But just because I think this gentleman had a valid point to make.
It's your duty to fully participate in society. You can't be part of a ghetto. You can't go off in a mountain and hide in a cave. You ride a horse, you know, across, through the woods. You have to play a full part in society. So don't segregate yourself. Don't get stuck in a mental ghetto. And the other thing, Sikhs have the largest, their vote is worth the most of any community in Britain. It's 20-fold. Because of the way it's the first past the post system, they only make up 0.7% of the population, but we have the largest power per voter. Our vote is worth 20 votes of somebody else. So we should use it wisely.
I think I just want to add to that Shamsher, I think you have to be careful about who you're speaking for, because there's lots of Sikhs, and I don't think your view of what Sikhism is shared by everybody else. You know, we are all free. The first thing about Sikhism is our freedom to be ourselves, our freedom of expression, our freedom to have equality amongst everything that we live and do for, and belief. There's no one doctrine. I don't believe in the politicization of the Sikh religion. It wasn't a doctrine. It was about self and community and equality.
I'd just like to say in the start, I did make it quite clear I'm speaking on behalf of myself. In fact, I think you're speaking on behalf of Sikh conservatives and Sikh Labour, right? So I'm speaking on behalf of myself and the National Sikh Youth Federation, which is a grassroots organisation. I'm not here to speak on behalf of all of Sikhs or Sikhi. I'm just here to talk about a Sikh perspective. I think we should move on to the next question.
No, I think we will. Yeah. All right. Now we know who's speaking for. The only person who needs to speak now is me. What is the best way? Next question. What is the best way to vote in order to help pressure European courts to respect Sikhs' rights for religious swear in our neighbouring nations? So, what is the best way to vote in order to help pressure European courts to respect Sikh rights for religious swear in our neighbouring nations? And we'll start with Shamsher this time.
Thank you. I think
Not to vote.
well, I know the political party candidates aren't going to accept a position outside of engaging with the state as ever being legitimate. But we as Sikhs know that our politics doesn't begin, and it's not about parties and elections. For us, it's a constant thing, right? So the European courts have already failed the Sikh community. In France, there's 2 Sikhs that refused the law in France, which was that if you want to have your official government ID, passport, driving license, whatever, you have to take your Bluestar off and take your picture. And they cited security reasons, which is kind of silly, because the person that wears a turban like 24/7, you got a picture of them that one time they don't have their Bluestar on, is not going to really help you identify them. But there's 2 Sikhs in the entirety of France. There's one Buzurg, a respected elder of ours, and there's one actually my dad knows him. His name's Shamsher Singh. He's an old friend of ours. And those are the only 2 Sikhs in the entire country that refused to engage with the state because of an unjust law. They chose to live in a perpetual state of chaos. Shamsher Singh cannot leave France. He doesn't have a passport, he doesn't have a driving license, yet he still drives, he still does work, he works as a taxi driver in fact, and when he gets stopped by the police, he pulls out his case file that's in the UN and says, here's the UN and I'm not going to submit to this law of me having to take my Bluestar off. Every other Sikh in France, by the way, has submitted to that. 2 individuals chose to live in a state of chaos. So the European courts are never going to give us anything, and we have to remember as Sikhs, every right that we enjoy, we agitated for. The right to wear a kirpan, we agitated for that. The right to wear a Bluestar, we agitated for that. Women, they have vote, they agitated for the vote. It wasn't given to us by engaging with the state. In fact, the states tried to take our kirpan away numerous times. So the rights that we gained them because we protested and agitated outside of the state's control.
Bally?
Yeah. So I would say, in a way, actually, I'd challenge you a little. In your process that you said you didn't engage with the state, actually by agitating you have tried to influence the state.
Influence, not engage.
Yeah, but engaging in a way by withholding, I guess, and agitating. So you are influencing the state.
Yeah.
And I guess what I'm trying to say
We're
is
forcing them to change laws, by the way.
Forcing, influencing, and I think, you work with people who are involved with the state. The state is not some monolithic organisation. It's made up by people who have their own views. Generally, everyone comes from a good place to try and change things for the better. And I think it's appealing to that innate humanity of people who are involved in the state to try and get change, try and make change happen. So, for example, if you go back to the slavery trade, the Quakers,
which was legal, by the way.
Yeah, and we all know the abhorrent nature of those times at that time, and it's relative, in terms of.
All I'm saying is, if you leave the state up to its own devices, slavery is going to be legal. Women ain't going to have the vote. There's going to be colonialism. They're going to come to your house and steal everything and sell it. Again, and then you're going to have to vote for it to get it back.
But again, that's quite a regressive view, and it's yes, it is quite extreme, and I think it's perfectly legitimate in a free liberal society that you have that view. And I actually think I welcome it because it challenges all of us in terms of our own opinions. But the key point is how do we influence Europe? And I think at this time, after this election, the big thing that is facing us as a country is how we engage with Brexit. And on the offer in terms of this election is a hard Brexit, which means no deal with the European Union, versus a process of engagement with our European partners, so we can try and influence them. So we in the Labour Party, we will scrap the no deal option, because I think that's a kamikaze option, only designed to please the tabloid media. And I know Kulveer personally probably does not agree with that. He worked for...
We will ask him.
Yeah, but he worked for Boris Johnson, and Boris Johnson was a great supporter of the European Union when he was Mayor of London, but for his own political vanity decided to go for the Brexit project. And in a way, if you look at the whole Brexit shambles, it was a decision by the Conservative Party, its own quarrel over Brexit, which turned into a national existential crisis. And we're now suffering under that. So how do we get about to change and engage with our European neighbours? Literally, we need a process of partnership, collaboration. So stop these threats. We need to guarantee rights for European citizens living here. We need to maintain our relationship with a lot of these European institutions. So, for example, Erasmus, a European Horizons funding project, and try and work for tariff-free access to the European single market, and have a meaningful vote on the process that requires proper democratic scrutiny and legitimacy via the parliamentary process. So I think the key is, how do we engage with Brexit, make it positive? It's not going to be a hard Brexit. If you have a hard Brexit, we're not going to get any change with our European neighbours. So I'll go back to the point. Engagement is the key, involving all parties as much as possible, and then we can make that change.
Kulveer?
Well, a lot of points there about which way you should vote if you want to have more pressure put in Europe about Sikh representation. But, you know, we are well respected. There's a lot of people who do respect us, especially in this country. You know, I'm going to tell you a little story. I was talking to a gentleman called Michael Portillo, who used to be an MP, he used to be quite highly regarded, once was considered to be a leader of the Conservative Party. And he saw me once when I was going and I was learning to ride a motorbike. And I was wearing a patga because I was going to put a helmet on when I was going to learn to ride a motorbike. And he saw me in the street and he stopped, looked at me, he hadn't seen me wearing a patga before. He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm going to ride a motorbike, etc." So he said, "Why aren't you wearing your turban?" And I started to explain that, you know, when you're riding a high-powered motorbike in London, I'd probably wear a helmet on top of my patga. And he said, "I want to tell you something. 1976, he was a young advisor to Margaret Thatcher. And she was leader of the opposition there, had been for about a year or so. Division bell goes. She's got a huge cabinet of very powerful Conservative men sitting there who don't really take well to this new first ever female leader of their party. And bell goes, and she says, what's the vote for?" And this is where they're all sitting, and you know, when the bell goes in the House of Commons, they have to all run and vote for whichever vote is. And somebody mutters, "It's for the Sikhs, it's for the Sikhs." She says, "What is it for the Sikhs?" You go, "Oh, they don't want to wear helmets." And everyone sort of mutters, you know, is that time and age? They were thinking, well, do we need to go and vote for this? And she frog marched every one of the shadow cabinet to go and vote and said, "Remember, these people fought for us." What am I saying? Representation, yes, but people have long memories of the Sikh community and what Sikhs have done, even the state or the perceived state. And it's a government, this government, that is continuing to fight for the Sikhs. Are we arguing? In some places we are. Are we engaging? In some places we are. For us to not be mandatory searched, our turban searched at our airports. That doesn't happen anymore because this government brought it in. Are we arguing that we shouldn't, if we don't want to, have to wear unrequired protective clothing in some working environments? And we don't have to now. Sometimes with those stupid rules where we'd have to wear a hard hat over a bug, and we weren't even in a hazardous area. We don't have to anymore. So there are practicalities. There is engagement, there is lobbying, and there are people listening. And it's the British government, and I don't mean just the Conservative government, but the British state has listened to the Sikh community for decades because it feels that it has a vested stake in the Sikh community. We've given a lot to this country. We do need to remind them, but they do remember as well. And that comes through engagement, through us telling people what we're going to do. Now, it comes to, okay, Brexit. We will still have a place of influence. Britain is seen as a beacon across the world, the cradle of democracy. There is a reason why our parliament is so respected. And when we exert pressure, then people do listen. And we will still exert pressure on the European Union. It's not going to be hard or soft. It will be pressure from us. The 27 other nations are already bilaterally, some of them talking to us about how they want to engage with Britain. Now, I'm going to say that I did vote Remain. But, you know, no deal, deal.
What does
You're
that
going to
mean?
hear, well,
Because
Bally, I
Theresa
think
May
you,
is always saying that no deal is better than a bad deal.
yeah,
What does that mean?
Bally, I think you know as well as I do that
It means nothing.
if we were going to go into a poker game and I told you, well, you know what, I'm definitely not going to do this, I'm only going to play half a hand, well,
Can you
that gives an advantage to people.
envision a deal with the European Union that's worse than a no deal?
Well,
Back
look,
to World WTO rules.
I think you're talking about, hypothesis of what could happen here.
It's just for
There's going to
slogan.
be a negotiation. There's going to be a negotiation, and you don't give up any of your opportunities. You don't. All right, let's say this.
But you don't
we
negotiate with
live in
slogans.
a dangerous world. We live in a world where there are nuclear weapons. I'm not happy about that. I don't think anyone wants to press the button on a nuclear weapon. But do we want to give up our nuclear weapons right now? Do we? Because I don't want to invest all those billions in renewing Trident. But unfortunately, the world is not in sync with a view that says we should give up that option, we should stand back. That's the view of the Labour Party leader and the Labour Party.
We've committed to renewing Trident.
Right, but the Labour Party leader wants nuclear disarmament.
I just want to say the question was, what's the best way to vote? No, one second. What's the best way to vote in order to pressure European courts to respect Sikh rights for religious swears in our neighbouring nations? I think I gave a pretty concise answer to that. It's directly
You didn't mention
agitating.
Brexit. You didn't mention Brexit.
The question
at all.
wasn't about Brexit.
But Brexit is crucial to
Europe.
that. It's crucial.
Europe, yeah.
It's crucial to this
For as a
question.
Sikh, the way we've always seen the state is that it's telling us that you cannot do this and you can't do that, and then we agitate and we gain the right to
But
do it.
without mentioning Brexit, that's complete fallacy.
If I can
I
wrap
remember
up
that.
this question, right, and I'll tell you why. I think, and I'll say a little bit of thing. I think hearing everything, I don't think anyone knows what's going to happen with Brexit. If anyone in this room can tell me what's going to happen with Brexit, I would bank on it, right? But the fact is, no one knows exactly what's going to happen with Brexit. It's a 2-year period where no one knows. Negotiations are happening. People are all thinking, right, what's going to... You don't know. So, once again, we can sit here and assume everything.
A good Brexit doesn't mean better rights for Sikhs.
I'm
sorry.
I'm Vijay Singh Rao, and I'm the parliamentary candidate for UKIP in Aylesbury.
I didn't hear that. Parliamentary candidate for UKIP.
So Theresa May has been very clear, and also Keir Starmer, and what they're saying is the same thing. Britain wants preferential market access, and they're willing to pay a leaving fee. They are willing to maintain programs. They're going to carry on with programs which they're committed to in the EU. They will accept. They will cooperate with the EU on justice. So that's European Arrest Warrant, ECJ, and also on security and home affairs. Home affairs is actually, what that means is freedom of movement and migration. So the only thing we're going to get out of Brexit is the ability to do our own trade deals. And there was, I think Boris was talking about that today.
Yeah, but that's not true because Theresa May always goes on about no deal is better than a bad deal.
But
So are you saying that's just vacuous as well?
I spoke to Keir Starmer in January,
Yeah.
and because there's a committee in the House of Commons about exiting the EU.
Yeah.
So they're in agreement about how it's going to be. So all this now is all rhetoric, and also when it comes up to the German elections, it's all rhetoric. But that's what the deal is.
No, we're gonna wrap up.
We're going to wrap up this question. What we all really wanted to know was, are the Polish people going to go back? No one answered that.
So I need to come in here.
Go on.
Yeah.
So the question was, what is the best way to go? Now, I was involved in the Paramjit Singh Burma case when Paramjit Singh Burma was a guy on holiday in Portugal with his family. He was arrested and there was a deportation court case to send him back to India, and God knows what was going to happen to him when he got there. So we wrote, myself, Sikh Council, loads of organisations got together. We fought that case hard. £54,000 it cost this fund to get him back into this country. But you know what? The only party that did engage, we reached out to every single party, and lots of political engagement happened. Jeremy Corbyn actually wrote a letter to his sister Socialist Party that had won, and actually expressed, the letter is available on our Facebook page if you want to read it, and he expressed concerns about what would happen to Paramjit Singh if he was deported back to India. The same concerns because it was going to set a very dangerous precedent. Had Paramjit Singh been deported, despite being granted asylum in the UK, it set a very dangerous precedent for all those Sikhs that migrated not just to UK but to Europe. So in terms of who responded the best to that, what we got from the Tories was, we are working very closely. That doesn't mean anything. He didn't do anything. You know, we had to put a lot of pressure on, and Jeremy did write that letter. Thankfully, that he was brought back to the UK. So for me, the answer to that question was there was an actual response by Jeremy Corbyn that we didn't get. John Spelling did some fantastic work on that as well. They raised it at all their various committee meetings. That to me was action, being part of that committee. So I just wanted to put that out there that, you know, engagement does work, and in that case we needed that engagement. We needed to be pressurising people.
And now a lot of people want to ask questions. Let's move on to the next question because Jasveer is saying, look, we're running out of time.
After that, we're going to open up questions just to the audience.
We will answer. So everyone,
Yeah.
because that's why I'm now, don't worry.
That's it.
The next one is a great concern. It's a popular question as well. The Sikh community has long spoken out about grooming gangs, something which our public services haven't been able to curtail. How will voting your way help us deal with this issue? And I will start off with Bally.
Okay. I think recent cases of grooming, which have been well publicised, does show failings in the way that local authorities, the police, public services in general have failed those young victims, whether they be Sikh girls, white girls, Muslim girls, those victims in general. And I think what we can do in the Labour Party is promise a case of investment in those services. So more investment in police, so 10,000 more police officers, more investment in local public services, more investment in sexual and health services. So we can create that resilience in local infrastructure to help prevent these grooming issues. And also the key to empowerment for all, whether they be young boys or young women, is education. So investment in our education to build up the talent and resilience of all communities is the best defence against predatory gangs that try and exploit people's vulnerabilities on those issues. Now, we all know of the recent grooming cases. I just want to make it clear that there is sexual exploitation from all communities, whether it be in grooming cases, whether it be on online sexual exploitation, whether it be exploitation within families, or whether it be other kinds of exploitation. The issue always comes back down to relationships of power between men and women have been victimised in those situations where usually male predators have exploited that from wherever community. What we need to do is build up resilience in all communities, and how we do that primarily is through education, but also more investment in local infrastructure, police, sexual health, public services such as local authorities, to ensure that this kind of thing is reduced and doesn't happen as much in the future. Criminal justice needs to be invested in too, so there's a proper deterrent. People who are found and got caught are apprehended, are convicted, so that sends a signal to the rest of the community that we do not tolerate this anymore. That's where I think we should be going.
Shamsher?
Again, this is an issue that the community has been aware of for a long time, and it's one again where we address the problem ourselves. As the question says, the public services haven't been able to actually curtail this problem, whereas the Sikh organisations, whether it's Sikh Youth UK, whether it's the SAS, whether it's even Basics, they talk about this grooming issue. They try to educate university students that are in those vulnerable spaces. They're the ones that are actually fighting this problem on the ground and preventing it from happening. When somebody's got a grooming issue, and a lot of this stuff is happening in the Midlands, they don't call the police first. Most times they call Sikh Youth UK, which actually go down and sort the problem out and engage with this issue, because sometimes the state's not going to respond in a direct way, right? So if something happens, you're going to have to wait for the police to come, to investigate, to do this, to do that. Whereas our community is much better equipped to deal with this problem, because we understand the environment within which these problems take place, the complex questions of identity. When you're at that young age, you're vulnerable, you're still trying to figure out who you are and what life is, and some students come to university from like poor families or like disadvantaged backgrounds, and they're more vulnerable, and our community addresses this again itself. and we have the organizations in place, and we actually now have the expertise in place where we're telling the authorities, this is how you deal with this problem. We tell the police, this is how you deal with the problem. This is where it's taking place, this is how you're going to deal with it. And that's us doing that at a community level, a grassroots level. I haven't seen any political party or any government bureau that actually, we pay to solve this problem ourselves. We raise the funds, we figure out what the problem is, and then we deal with it. There's no government funding for this. The police are useless in this. So again, it's apani hatti appe hi kaaj saware, with your own hands. Take responsibility, engage, direct democracy.
Kulveer?
Yeah, look, I agree. We have a community that looks to self-police. Okay. But it's only so far we can go. When real cases happen, we do have to bring in the police, the courts, the justice services, and various other areas that will actually deal with the issue. It's something that's been going on, but you're going to hear a lot about communities. We're going to hear a lot, not just about our community, we hear a lot about the Muslim community, don't we? We hear a lot about them needing to self-police. Is it that easy? Is it that simple? I think everybody will have to work together to solve these problems. I don't think it's apni hatti apni khao. I'll just keep doing it myself here, solve all my problems myself.
That was from Gurbani, by the way.
I know, but it's in the context that you're using it. If I need an operation, if I have a problem, a health problem, and I can't find a Sikh doctor, I'm not going to be able to solve my problem, am I? I'm going to have to rely on somebody else.
In this case, we can solve the problem. And when you say,
well, in this case, it's not just one case you can and one case you can't. You have to see in the context of the world that we live in. We have to work in the world that we live in. We have to understand the communities that we all live in. And I think it's really challenging. I'm going to challenge you on this because I don't believe in this sense of isolationism, in this sense of being detached from the rest of the world around us. We must engage. We must show our communities and be strong as a community. I think, for a long time I felt disappointed in our community not sort of showing a future to young people. I went on Sikh Missionary Society camps from the age of 11. I loved them. They taught me about my religion. They taught me about, what it really meant to be a Sikh. I felt it invaluable alongside everything else I was learning. It made me more rounded to understand my culture, my faith, and then the broader society that I lived in. And I think we need to have that balance. But I think the key thing here is we'd also hear about investing. Investing in services. You'll always hear, generally the Labour Party say they're going to invest in everything. Well, where do we get that money to invest from? Tax? Sorry, it's my turn now.
You asked the question, so I'll answer it.
No, hold on, it's a rhetorical question. I'll come back to you. Money comes from tax, yes, but it comes from a strong economy. Right, we've got to have jobs. We've got to have money being paid to the exchequer.
It seems like an awful long wait to deal with grooming when we're dealing with this problem
you can laugh at all of these issues, but whether it's grooming, whether it's public services, whether it's frontline policing, whether it's hospital beds, whether it's waiting lists, these all come from money that needs to be spent from the taxpayer. And I'm sorry, it's not a laughing matter. It's not a laughing matter.
No, I googled sex offenders within the British government and the list was really long. I just have a credibility issue as well.
Well, I don't know why we're bringing sex offenders in a British government into a conversation about public services.
Because the issue for us...
You have to be correct about the discussion you want to have and respect the discussion
as well, right?
You want to respect the discussion we're having. So let's have a respectful discussion about the issue we're discussing.
So when I'm talking about the credibility...
When we're finishing my point... So it's about.
So you asked a question to me in your point. I
didn't ask a question. You interrupted about talking about sex offenders.
It's about credibility as well, right?
So do you want to make your point about credibility?
I do, please. Yeah, thank you very much. It's about credibility. The Gurbani teaches us, Rajeshi Makaddam Kutte, the rulers are corrupt, the officials are corrupt, and they will always be corrupt because their goal is to maintain power. And when we look at the credibility of the British government that can't sort out sex offenders within the establishment itself, they want to tell us as a community how we should deal with grooming. I think we're educated enough to see what we're capable of understanding and resolving within our own capacity. It doesn't mean we're being complacent. It just means we're looking at reality and we're kind of making our own assessment based on that.
So look, what it comes down to is we do need to invest in certain things. We want to work with community. That's why there is a new crime action plan, £2.5 million invested by this government on working with communities against race crime. This thing is going up the priority list. because we want to understand what a modern Britain looks like. I care about a modern Britain of all communities, of respecting all the people here and the issues that we have. But we also have to understand how we're going to do that. And how we're going to do that is by having a strong country which has jobs, economy, and that can afford to do these things. I want to solve all these problems. I think as a community, I want us to play our part in solving the problem, and I want the state to understand that sometimes, as Shamsher said, we can do a better job than, say, calling directly for police services, because they might not understand the sensitivities that they have to deal with. But there is also a place for those services, for the state to play its part, and that's how we have to work together.
Let's engage the audience a little bit. Let's have some questions.
Okay, I'm sorry, but that was a very politically correct response from three of you. I think a lot of the cases relating to sexual grooming, particularly with the Sikh community, it's coming largely from the Pakistani Muslim community, and that's to quote the Sikh Awareness Society, which deals with these cases on a regular basis. Now, I'm not saying that all Muslims are rapists and everything. I'm sure loads of Pakistani Muslims have expressed their disgust, people like Mohammed Shafiq and everything. But what I'm trying to say is, I think we need to stop being politically correct, identify the problem, isolate it, and work alongside the Pakistani Muslim community in solving this. Because it's all good saying, it's a community-wide problem, but you need to identify where it's coming from. That's the point I have to make. Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm not happy with a single one of those responses. You know why? Because first of all, no disrespect, because I know you all care about this issue, because these are our daughters and our sisters that we're talking about, but you are all men. I have been dealing with sexual abuse and sexual grooming cases for the last 5 years. I've worked with organisations like the Sikh Council, I've worked with CRASAC, which is the Coventry Sexual Abuse Helpline, I've worked with SWAN, I've worked with the Sikh Helpline. And the biggest issue that no one is talking about is sexual abuse within our own community, within our gurdwaras. Right, so there is an issue, and I've also dealt with a 15-year-old and a 17-year-old girl who were being targeted and they were being groomed by a Pakistani gang as well. So I see the whole wide range of issues. What we're also not talking about is how fundamentally the Sikh family unit is broken, which is the root cause where all of these victims, and I've had it makes me really emotional because I've had victims come to me asking for. So, I'm sorry if Sikh youth are doing something, they're not helping the girls that I've helped, and I can't even go into the numbers of the case I've dealt with. So, that, I am calling out Sikh Awareness Society, I am calling out Sikh Youth UK, because there are girls who, okay, you're saying we're listening to you, but nothing is done because we are not able to secure prosecutions for these girls. Why? Because a girl does not have a camera on her when she's being sexually assaulted. Sadly, unless someone's got any video evidence or text evidence or recorded evidence, it is very, very hard for those girls to secure a prosecution. And what our community does very, very well is blame the girl. We have honour, we have basically, we have parents who suppress their daughters. I had a case where we had 5 victims. Not one of those victims would report it to the police because their parents suppressed it. When are we going to start talking about those issues? Before we start going to the police and we say, we have a massive issue with that in our own community. And this is the Amritari community. I'm calling it out as it is. This is the Punjabi community. This is the Amritari community. Then we start bringing the Jatha bashing wars in. If the perpetrator is from one Jatha, then the other Jatha is going to be like, oh yeah, we'll support this case because we've got a grudge with them. But when it's from your own Jatha, then oh no, we don't want to discuss it. I've gone to every single level of every organisation and I'm hitting a brick wall with it. To the point where you speak to someone like Sikh Helpline and they've tried to get cases to CPS, and it gets to the point where, and even if you look around the statistics about this, if a case does go to CPS, the victim themselves pull out because they are pressured to. We need to create within our own community before we do need to get police involvement. We do need to create an environment where girls are willing to speak out and know they are not going to be prejudiced for that.
I think I want to add to that. I did say I was disappointed in our community. I said I was disappointed. I'm disappointed at how I've seen us react. I've seen when people have tried to, when we had a play put on called Bally in Birmingham, how the Sikh community responded to these things. When people try to talk about issues within our community, how we respond to it. I think we need to have a look at that as well. I agree with you fully.
Well,
Can I just say, can you get? I'll get in touch with you as well. If you mention Crasac and West Midlands Police and local authorities, we'll hook
Crasac have
up.
done a fantastic job. They've actually written a report.
We'll talk about that at the end when you've got your little time to network. Right. In the meantime,
Just to on the right, you're talking about engagement. However, since your party has been elected, the number of police has actually reduced. I believe the number is 20,000. We're talking about things like having more police officers and having those conversations, but the people aren't actually there to prosecute these perpetrators. How are we actually going to get anywhere? Surely shouldn't the parties be actually thinking about donations or some sort of funding to these Sikh helplines so that the cases which Bendy says are able to actually move forward? A lot of it is actually the funding side. Why isn't the government actually noticing these organisations like Sikh UK, Sikh Awareness, and actually saying, you know what, you guys are doing a fantastic job, how about we help you? And I feel like every single taxpayer and everybody here will actually say, you know what, I don't mind my taxes going towards a cause like that at the end of the day.
Yeah, look, I think you're right, but as the lady was saying, that sometimes there's arguments within these actual groups themselves. She was calling them out. So there's a challenge about where we have these organisations and what they're doing, and do we agree, do we not agree? But I think on your broader point in terms of funding, again, it comes to that point of funding. I've seen since the last Labour government, 2010, the police budget in the UK was £2.8 billion a year. It's now 3.8 billion. Yeah. So we could talk numbers, we could talk where policing is. And I don't know if any of you remember the now infamous note that the Chief Secretary of the Treasury, Liam Byrne, left when the Labour government left. Sorry, there's no money left. Right.
Translated, paise mokge. Mobile
But the point is that yes, everybody wants to fund things, but we're actually doing things differently. There is a different way of doing it. I actually know a bit about, in my time at City Hall, how policing is transforming. Not because of numbers, but actually the way the police work, how they're more mobile, they've got video cameras on, they're looking at having mobile offices through vehicles rather than actually being based in an office somewhere, sitting there waiting for people to come to them. The whole way, new technology, new techniques, it's not, yes, there is a numbers issue, but there's also new ways of doing that and investing in that. And that's a bigger question about how we change the delivery of, say, policing, total policing in London, which has a huge issue with, current terrorism and everything else. But to politicise it to say, is this a case of this many numbers means that gets worse? It's not that issue. It's much more complicated.
Young man at the back had his hand up all night. So.
I'm sort of disillusioned with the government at the moment. Where do I vote, etc. is all on my mind. I'm listening to everybody on the panel right now, and I don't look and talk as passionately as Shamsher Singh on the end. I feel exactly like him. You might think he don't speak for everybody, but I don't look nothing like him when he speaks for me. And the key thing, what's the government going to do? Do they feel my pain? Because I hear everything he says and it hurts my heart. But does the government feel my pain? You might personally, but the people you represent, do they feel my pain? I don't feel that. Why should I vote?
I think there is pain out there, and it's like you said yourself, you feel this pain. I think the community out there feels this pain. We've had 7 years of austerity. We've had reduction.
It's not as a Sikh. It's nothing else. It's not money. It's not NHS.
So it's an identity. It's to do with your identity and exactly what is your pain in terms of. Just give me an example.
Example thrown up already. Bendy, I think, threw it up. No, some shit actually. The start in France has been taken off. I want uproar. I want people like him standing on the stage screaming the way he's screaming. I don't want people like, no disrespect. You're very political. Your answers are fantastic. But I don't want. I want someone who speaks like that. Who speaks it as it is, as a Sikh. He says, you know what, let me put everything else to the side for a second and let me tell you who I am and what I'm about, and then we can speak on other levels, because I am very articulate, I am very etc. etc. But I want that first. And I want someone up there that speaks from that and says, okay, let me answer that as a Sikh. Here you go, this is what I think, and this is, you should think whatever you want, but this is the general gist of my perspective. Now let me give you a political perspective. If I choose to take a political perspective, fine. If I don't, then that's different.
So I think the key would be having that engagement with you personally. So having that conversation with you personally, because I think in that way, maybe you can understand and have, I guess, an empathy with how politics works at a diplomatic and international level. So I think to have, I guess, talking from a podium and shouting at the next person may get some political points, but I genuinely believe this. I think it's quite divisive and reactionary for our society. I personally could maybe score a few cheap points if I go out there and say, look, this person is bad, I feel your anger, I'm going to do something about it. But it doesn't really get anything done. I think the key is we really do need to listen. I think 100%. And I think we haven't done the listening bit well enough. All established parties.
Yeah, look, I'll agree.
And I think once we do that, and then there's a little bit of give and take, I think people need to also understand actually some of the realities of these complex issues. These are massively complex issues that don't have simple soundbite answers. We let you down with these soundbites, and I'm sorry about that, but we need to explain some of the difficulties and nuances where we can start engaging with the process and working together to get some of those things done. And I tell you, it may not happen straight away, but as long as we're making progress, that's the key thing.
I don't think the progress is the key thing. I think because this is what's always presented to us, right? That the next election, the next legislation, the next government, the next thing, the next iPhone, it's going to give us happiness, it's going to give us the answers. It's not like that for us. We have to be fully conscious. Sikhi talks about us being Jagrat Jot. That means fully conscious all the time. And by co-opting into the system of power, what are we choosing to turn our backs on? What portions of reality are we completely ignoring because we've got a vote and we've got a certain right, we've got an NHS, we've got a certain standard of living? We can't do that as a Sikh because we can't take our Sikhi out and become British citizens or a British Sikh citizen, or whatever the hyphenated partial identity in reality is. And I know it's incredibly difficult to always try to live consciously in a Sikh way, but that's what we're here to do. This is our challenge. We have to engage with the Sikh vision, and we have to put that first, and we can't put our Britishness or our party, because it's always going to compromise the Sikh position. By co-opting into these systems of power, these structures, we're legitimizing them. By voting, what you're saying is you give your consent to the state and its right to govern you, and its right to, and its past, present and future, you're saying are legitimate. Because the foundation of the state, let's not forget, is slavery and genocide and colonialism. That's how we have the vote today. We don't have the vote today because we're good citizens. We have the vote today because of colonialism and slavery, and this system perpetuates it. It's not good enough for us to say, you know what, it's the policeman is racist. No, the system is designed in a certain way to make sure that it only benefits rich white people and rich white men. That's the reality. That's the reality. And of course you're going to disagree with it because your experience is different. But as a brown person, as a brown person, sorry.
I'm British and I'm from Serbia.
Yeah.
If anybody ever will expose more in the world as Serbs, that's us. Especially all of the last 70 years. You know why? So we, even though I have done
more than 120 million people stolen from Africa?
Do you mind if I finish my sentence?
Yeah.
So I don't agree. I live in Britain for 20 years. And I feel absolutely fine. I mean, I don't have any problem.
I'm happy for you.
Kulveer was my friend, and I came here to hear. He kindly invited me, and I have never seen any problem. I really don't know what you're talking about.
What I'm talking about is, for me to be born here as a British citizen, my country back where I'm from was split in half by a guy called Radcliffe who drew a line on a map in 1947, and that resulted in the death of 13 million Sikhs, right? that resulted in the death of 13 million Sikhs, and we came here because of that fracture, and that broke us from our very way of being. It broke our land in half, it broke our culture. The British, while they were in occupation of our territory, they tried to ban our kirpans, our turbans, our beards, our language, they imprisoned our teachers, and through that process we've arrived in Britain. So when we talk about the vote, and we talk about our right to engage, and the police numbers are increasing, all that's at what cost though? We're legitimizing slavery and genocide.
Guys, no, what we're going to do now is just open up any questions for any of you.
General questions.
So
Young man at the back has a right
The next 10 minutes.
Yeah, so this actually touches upon something that is a constant issue. So firstly, I'm actually disillusioned about this event because I assumed it was going to be politics discussed from a Sikh perspective. It just happens to be Sikhs discussing politics. That's the first thing. Secondly, we mentioned the idea of respect, the idea that the British government respects Sikhs, and this even touches upon the European Union and the rights of Sikhs in Europe. I mean, the British government doesn't respect Sikhs. I mean, I think we use that term very loosely. The British government, in its occupation of Punjab, banned the Star. Sikhs were banned, and the Akali agitation and the Akali Morcha was a response to that banning. The color black was banned. The color black was worn by Sikhs as an agitation. Hundreds of thousands of Sikhs were arrested, some of them for non-political agitation and some of them for a very violent agitation. Whatever the agitation was, but Sikhs were banned. Secondly, the British government in Punjab banned kirpana. So for almost a decade, kirpans were banned throughout Punjab. So I don't think the British government respects us. I mean, if anything, they should know who the hell Sikhs are. They banned our identity. They tried taking away who we are as people, as Sikhs, and they even banned us from our own existence. They tried banning us. So it's no respect that they have for us. They should know who we are.
They took the keys away from the Akal Takht, and we had to agitate to get them back.
Okay, next question. Yeah, go on.
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ ਹੋਪ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਸਮਝ ਆਉਂਦੀ ਆ but I'm going to be mixing in English as well. So ਸਿੱਧੀ ਗੱਲ ਆ, as a young person, as a student, the thing which I'm seeing in future, ਸਿੱਧੀ ਗੱਲ, like which I'm seeing in future, either I can engage in a so-called MP or a sector or council political way, or I can engage in another political way. So which is ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਕਹਿ ਲਓ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸਿੱਖੀ ਦੀ ਐਸੈਂਸ ਆ, ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਹੋਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ, ਤਾਕਤ ਹੋਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ UK ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ. So ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਕਹਿ ਲਓ ਕਿ just as a surety, ਜਿੱਦਾਂ for example we need some Sikhs here, we're going to be working with the government, that's good, applaudable. But then also we got Sikhs, ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਕਹਿ ਲਓ ਕਿ they will engage in a certain way, which will be very Sikh way, ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਕਹਿ ਲਓ ਤਾਕਤ. So example, if we can have Archbishop of Canterbury in UK, ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਕਹਿ ਲਓ ਕਿ ਜੇ ਰਬਾਈ ਹੋ ਸਕਦਾ ਆ of UK, Muslim community are talking about Imam, ਤੇ ਅਸੀਂ UK ਦਾ ਜਥੇਦਾਰ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਕਿਉਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ? So that's first question, ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਅੱਗੇ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਜਾਓਗੇ? ਦੂਜਾ question ਆ, it's very much to my heart. ਮੋਦੀ ਇੱਥੇ ਆਇਆ, the first thing he said when he left back, ਕਿ ਇੱਥੇ extremism ਵੱਧਦੀ ਪਈ ਆ. So the thing is, extremism ਉਹ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਕਹਿ ਗਿਆ? Sant Jarnail Singh Ji Khalsa is hero for me, and he will be hero. So maybe, just as a question, how would you be humbly kind of tell governments to tell them that he is a Sikh hero? So how can that ideology be protected? And we as a...
It's a death cult, forget it.
Bally so we as a young Sikh, when we go out, so we can say our ideology is the Sikh ideology and we stand to those principles. So question ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਕਹਿ ਲਓ ਦੋ ਬਹੁਤ ਸਿੰਪਲ ਆ, ਨੌਜਵਾਨ, I'm asking as a student, ਕਿ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਅਸੀਂ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ engagement ਕਰੂੰਗੇ?
Okay, I think that there's a slight risk here, and I'll explain the risk carefully. I think what we need to be careful of as a community is recognise that we don't have a monopoly on victimhood. What do I mean by that? There are communities out there that have been victims. The white working class have been victims of the capitalist system, and they've had to fight for their right through engagement with the political process, with the labour movement, trade union movement, to try and get emancipation and rights and universal public services that benefit this country. There are plenty other communities that have faced oppression. And why I say we don't have a monopoly on victimhood is going back to the point about grievance. Grievance issues are great to get some motivation, but will that actually help change things for the better? My considered view is, that grievance alone does not change. Grievance helps you to engage, recognise the first part, but then to change, you need to engage. You need to engage with people who may not necessarily agree with you. You need to engage with people from different communities who actually do share some of your views. But if you come of it from a sort of nuclear, divisive perspective, I think you're going to actually ruin that whole engagement process, which fosters that positive change. That's my challenge to many of you in the audience.
Totally reply. They can go in conjunction with the avi ਗੱਲ ਆ ਸੋ ਅਸੀਂ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਸੋਚਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਆ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਕੰਜੰਕਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੰਮ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ ਤੇ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਕਹ ਲਓ ਕਿ ਅਸਲੀ ਪੋਲੀਟੀਕਲ ਵੌਇਸ ਅੱਗੇ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਜਾ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਗੱਲ ਆ ਹੋਣੀ ਆ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਕਹ ਲਓ ਕਿ ਉਹੀ ਗੱਲ ਆ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਆ ਮੁੜ ਖੇਡ ਕੇ ਕਿ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਜੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਕੁਝ ਕਰਨ ਦਾ ਤਰੀਕਾ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ ਤਾਂ ਸਰਕਾਰਾਂ ਹਮੇਸ਼ਾ ਕਹਿੰਦੀਆਂ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਅੱਤ ਚੱਕਦੇ ਆ ਹੁਣ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਕਹ ਲਓ ਕਿ ਆਹੀ ਚੀਜ਼ ਆ ਹਾਊ ਕੈਨ ਵੀ ਐਕਚੁਅਲੀ ਅਸ਼ੋਰ that our ideology, maybe the parties which are in
power, the first thing I would say to that, the first thing, right, and I'm not here to speak, but I would say the first thing is trying to get all the Jathibandiya to sit down for 5 minutes and actually belie each other. There's always a walkout, and that's for the protests and the rallies. There's a rally every year, right? So what has that achieved, and how is that? Is that supposed to be a grievance, or is that supposed to be engaging the government? Because it's held every year. There was one. Right, okay, so that's for my bit. Now, young man over there asked...
Sorry, just very briefly on Paji. Paji ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕੁਐਸਚਨ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਸੀਗਾ ਉਹਦਾ ਜਵਾਬ ਸਿਰਫ ਇੱਕੋ ਹੀ ਆ ਕਿ ਪੂਰਾ ਨਾਉ ਕਰੇ ਕਰਤਾਰ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਸਰਕਾਰਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਦੀ ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਈ ਵੀ ਮਸਲੇ ਸਿਆਸੀ ਹੋਵੇ ਜਾਂ ਕੋਈ ਸਾਡਾ ਕੋਈ ਇੱਥੇ ਰਹਿਣ ਵਾਲਾ ਕੋਈ ਮਸਲਾ ਹੋਵੇ ਕਦੀ ਕੋਈ ਮਸਲਾ ਹੱਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਨਾ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਿੱਖ ਦੇ ਮਸਲੇ ਆਪ ਹੱਲ ਕਰਨੇ ਪੈਣੇ ਆ ਤਾਂ ਇਹਦਾ ਹੱਲ ਇੱਕੋ ਹੀ ਹੈ ਜੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਸਿੱਖ ਸਿਆਸਤ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ ਉਹਦਾ ਨਿਸ਼ਾਨਾ ਸਿਰਫ ਇੱਕੋ ਹੀ ਆ ਉਹ ਸਾਡੀ ਆਜ਼ਾਦੀ ਆ ਕਿ ਮਹਾਰਾਜ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਰਾਜ ਬਿਨਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਧਰਮ ਚਲੇ ਹੈ ਧਰਮ ਬਿਨਾ ਸਭ ਦਲੇ ਮਲੇ ਹੈ ਸੋ ਅਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਮਸਲੇ ਹੱਲ ਕਰਨੇ ਆ ਅਸੀਂ ਸਿੱਖ ਸਿਆਸਤ ਦੇਖਣੀ ਆ ਫਿਰ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਆਜ਼ਾਦੀ ਵੱਲ ਉਸ ਨਿਸ਼ਾਨੇ ਵੱਲ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਤੁਰਨਾ ਪੈਣਾ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਉਹ ਸ਼ਕਤੀ ਸਾਡੇ ਹੱਥਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੈ ਨਿੱਜ ਬਲ ਮਹਾਰਾਜ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਨਿੱਜ ਬਲ ਇੱਦਾਂ ਰਾਜ ਮਿਲਣਾ ਕਿ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਆਪ ਉਦਮ ਕਰਨਾ ਪੈਣਾ
Young man at the back.
No. Cal will direct the questions.
Okay. Go on.
Benji over there in the white, please. You've been waiting quite a while. Benji?
Yes. So I've got two questions. One was both petition chair. And the first question was, could you just clarify something you said about Sikhs agitating the state to give women the right to vote? Are you referring to Britain?
I was talking about just generally as the rights that we've enjoyed as Sikhs and women, the rights that they've enjoyed, like their vote, they received that by agitation and challenging the power of the state. I didn't mean what I think you thought I meant, which is that Sikhs were somehow part of that, even though they were with Princess Sophia, Dalip Kaur's, Ranjit Singh's.
Were you referring to Britain?
Yes, yeah. Well, actually, no. I was referring to Britain, Punjab, anywhere, any right that we've enjoyed politically, we've had to agitate for that right.
You're talking about women in Britain, but in women in Britain, it was women that fought for women to get the vote, not any man.
Yeah.
It was a woman.
I didn't mean Sikhs in that instance, yeah.
Oh, okay, fine. And my other question
Sorry.
is to you about, it's valid point you're talking about grooming, and it's, very important that we try and resolve this. And the point was made from a lady over on the side there. We're talking about the Sikh community, helping the Sikh community to try and reduce the problems. My question to you is, are you only helping Sikhs, or are you helping white women? Are you helping black women? Are you helping Pakistani women? Are you helping Bangladeshi? Because being a Sikh doesn't mean just helping Sikhs. So how many other people or women are you trying to protect through the work that you're doing?
I think grooming is such a national kind of problem that our resources as a community are limited, and unfortunately, if our Guru has told us Sarbat da Pala Karna, we want to help everyone. Unfortunately, in this moment that we're in now, that we can only help as our resources dictate, right? Because essentially we're picking up where the state kind of fails, right? It's failure with all its resources, with all the police, with all the monitoring they have, the intelligence. There's this failure that takes place, and then as a community we step in to try to resolve that problem. And it is focused on the Sikh community.
So it's only Sikh females. You're not protecting other females.
There are other cases of Muslims. There's limited cases.
That works with a lot of these organisations that are being referred to, like Sikh Youth Federation and SAS. I know for a fact that they do also help girls outside of.
But it is a very small percentage.
Who will come to them is only Sikhs because the Sikh Youth Federation.
But there is a worrying element.
Let's let her continue.
Sorry.
So I just want to get clarity on that. The second thing I'd like to get clarity on is, you're you're saying you're doing lots of work, and I'm not refuting that. I'm sure you are, I'm sure there's lots of females that are being.
That's not us, by the way. I'm just talking about
that's
organisations we
fine.
know.
It's going back to the gentleman on the stage. What proportion, if you've got all the women, so you talk about all females, it is males as well, young males who are hurt and exploited as well. What proportion of the women and males are you actually working with nationally? Because you're saying you're doing a great job, nationally it's huge. So what proportion? 50% of the people? 20%, 10%?
Well, 100% of the cases that I actually mentioned, and so this isn't myself. These are three separate organisations: Sikh Youth UK, the Sikh Awareness Society, and basically Sikh has commented about grooming issues. So these are three separate organisations with separate resources, and they deal with the problem in their own way. I personally wouldn't have access to how much of a percentage of the overall problem they're trying to deal with.
There is no data.
The nature of the issue.
Sikh Youth UK have never released data in terms of percentage, and that's all my issue is with them, not with their work. They've never presented data. If you do want data, you might want to contact Sikh Helpline. They have a lot of information.
Because annually, I'm thinking like, if you talk about the number of women and males affected, and
You've got no data.
There's no proportion.
No, it's not. It's an excellent question. I mean, that's something that we should kind of look into. Yeah.
Young man at the back.
So my question is going to be pretty boring compared to the others, but one of the reasons I voted to remain in Brexit is I was worried. I travel a lot, and I always get hassle with security at airports. And one of my things was that England it's got the largest Sikh community right in Europe. How strong are we going to be representing the Sikhs in other countries when they have problems now in Europe? Now that we're going to be out of the EU, like how many times are going to be seeing problems in like Spain or Serbia, or these countries that are not in the bloc, and how influential, how much like power do we have now that we're not in Brexit? Is it going to? It's a question. Is it going to?
That's. I mean, I agree with you completely, because as we've got Britain has had a traditional relationship with an historic relationship with the Sikh community, a large Sikh community in the country itself, and I think can help inform and understand our European partners about the particular needs and issues of the Sikh community. And I think by basically ejecting ourselves out of the European Union, I voted Remain. I've done ourselves a disservice. Now we have to respect the democratic mandate in terms of the referendum, but what we can't do is continue that disengagement process by having these threats of no deal. We'll be desperate for looking for other trade deals with, for example, Donald Trump's America, Saudi Arabia. We don't want to go down that route. What we want to do is engage with Europe as partners, and by doing that, we need to try and maintain tariff-free access to European single market and many of their existing institutions.
Right, young man over
there. Do you want to respond to that, Kulveer?
Just quickly, yeah. Look, you're right. We have to make sure that we, as a community, are respected. Whatever happens after Brexit, I voted Remain, right? But as Bally says, we have to make the best of what's now the democratic decision. But the key thing here is, and I want to come back to that point about, do you see me, do I see you? I've been part of the Conservative Party for 16 years. I've stood as a candidate, I've been vice chairman of the party, I've worked for Boris at City Hall for 4 years, I was responsible for transport, all of those things. Every room, every building, every parliament, every official, every country I go to, I take my Sikhism with me. That's who they see first. I think Shamsher said it when they say they see it as Sikh first. Whatever it is I say, whatever it is that then comes out behind me, my Sikhi comes first. And I represent that. And you change people's minds and you change their perceptions about who we are through the deeds that we do and the engagement that we do. And we'll continue to do that, whatever happens through Brexit, because the British people and this government historically has been the first to support and acknowledge the Sikh community. Maybe not as much as we want to. There's no state is perfect. I'll say that now. There's always failings in the state, but we'll continue to do that.
Just on the end of that, and very briefly, France and Britain were both in the EU when France banned at the start. So I don't think whether we stay or we leave, it's going to be on us to resolve those issues again.
No, sorry. Like, we're going to have to wrap up, so it's going to be our last question. I just want to put into context Viji's question was because he works for Carlsade and does humanitarian work, so I assume that was part of why he wants to know about how we engage in the
My
country.
thing is, how serious are the UK going to be taken serious? How serious
Outside of Europe, yeah. Outside of Europe.
I respect the fact that we're out now, so we have to deal with the situation. Okay, now is the rest of the European countries still going to be taking us seriously now
That's why we need to engage with them.
If there's a Sikh that's stuck in Italy now,
Yeah.
and he's stuck in the airport, right? Obviously, it comes down to the Italian government. They're responsible. But how? Let's say if we want to put pressure on our government to affect, to have a word with Italy. Say, guys, listen, this is, the word to start. They don't need to be said. Doesn't it lessen our
influence? Of course it does.
So I want to answer your question directly. So what you're getting at, if we're British citizens or American citizens, the example is British, right? If we're British citizens, will Britain speak on our behalf, and how effective will that voice be when we as Sikhs get into a problem in another country, right? The answer to that is no government is ever going to represent us fully. They're only going to represent us to the point it suits them and their objectives as political parties, whether it's the Tories or the Labour. You're going to have to negotiate with their strategies and what they see as the end goal in order for them to take you seriously. We're only taken seriously in this world if we pursue our sovereignty. So the answer is, if as Sikh representation, we need that from our
Guys. Young man, question there.
I'm just going to say, regardless of what colour rosette any of these guys wear, you've got to remember that the title comes first, is that we represent the House of Good and Honour first, before we represent Conservative or Labour or whatever.
Yeah.
Respect my brother on the end because he's got mad power. But on election day, we have to work out which party represents Sikh values and Sikh principles the most. Regardless of whatever, abstaining or whatever, please make your case for the Sikh principles that your party stands for.
Excellent, thank you.
That will be our last question. We'll give everyone two minutes to speak on that.
You should ask the candidates first.
Yeah, so I would say, I would throw that back to you. Ultimately, it's a personal decision that you need to make about which party represents you and your Sikh values. From a Labour perspective, we believe in community, we believe in the rights of the many, not just the rights of the few. We believe in investing in our future. We believe in creating a society that really does work for everybody. And by that, I mean investing in our education. That benefits our future generation of all communities. Investing in our police, in our own security. Investing in our health service so that we have a healthy, happier society. And also investing in our regions economically through a national, regional-based transformation fund that's investment-led, that will crucially create those investment-led jobs of the future that are more productive. Now, Kulveer used to work for the Transport for London, and he was a director of Transport for London.
I was on the board.
I was on the board. Now, London does exceptionally well in terms of transport funding per head, over £1,000, over £1,500 per head. But some regions get less than 10 times that. What we need to do is invest in all of the country, in all communities, because only then can people feel engaged in the democratic, economic and social process. That's Labour's promise to you. That's why I ask you to vote for Labour.
Kulveer.
Well, the parties don't represent religions. We have to start from that basis. Yeah, our religion is what we have personally, is personal to us and our values. I think you're asking the question, is it this or is that? They're not mutually exclusive as well. You can hold both. I think we are the embodiment of wanting to be Sikh and be politically engaged. The Conservative Party is looking to provide safety, security and stability. That's what we want for our country. And I think that's what all of us want for our families, for our loved ones, for our homes, for our communities. How can we be safe? The first job of government is to protect its citizens. You're asking about, the gentleman, he's got his headphones on now, so I can't talk to him about it. But look, the one way you are protected when you are abroad or if something happens is that passport that says you're a British citizen. That's what counts. Whether it's Donald Trump's America, whether it's Qatar, or whether it's France. It's that passport. No matter caste, colour, creed, equalities from being that British passport holder, and the British consulate, the British embassy will respect you and come and help you. So that's about that. But the Conservative Party, safe security. Now, you've got a choice at the election. We spoke about this at the beginning. Fundamental choice between two different parties. One has an ideology and a dogma that it is professing. Yeah, for the many, for the all, socialism, Marxism, it's all there. It's in the little red book. It's all about the state will pay for it all, the state will decide for you, the state will raise taxes, yes, it's for the many, not for the few. If you've read Orwell, Animal Farm, you've probably heard some of this narrative before, and if you've seen the 70s...
Talk about your own policy.
Well, if you see it, hold on, my turn to describe why you vote Conservative, but that's what that's offer is there. On the other side is practicality and pragmatism. We must have employment. We must have a functioning society that is well funded, public services that get the money that they need, without having to raise debt, without having to carry debt over for decades and generations to come. Invest in a way that keeps this country working well. Invest in our railways, invest in our hospitals. At the last general election, the NHS asked for £7 billion. It was a Conservative party, the only party that said it would give the NHS the money it wanted. Sorry, it did. I'm sorry, you want to talk politics, but sorry, we're talking about politics. No, I'm sorry, you've had your say. We're now talking about...
Your government, I watched people die because from diagnosis to treatment, there's lack of funding.
I think we can always... I'm sorry, that's not right. Okay, look, I've been in hospitals, I've seen the improvements, seen the new hospitals, I've seen the change, I've seen the investment.
Oh, I've seen the change.
Yeah, but there were ways, as I said, no, look,
The house service is crumbling.
I thought we were going to have no tutu mama, a little respect for the panel and the debate. So, there is always going to be failings in the system. And you can always blame the government for not investing enough. But let's ask the question, A, how are they going to invest? Where is the money going to come from? Who's going to provide protection? Who do you trust to deliver it? It will come down to when you go to the ballot booth, and you'll make your own decisions. I respect all of you to make your own decisions, but you'll decide on who do you trust and respect to stand by those decisions and be able to deliver them. That's your choice to make, and that's why I'll be voting Conservative.
Shamsher, you have the final word.
I understand that living according to the way the Guru wants us to live is incredibly difficult. You have to make incredibly difficult stances. You're going to lose everything for your principles and for your morality and for the vision of society as we see it, right? We want society to be egalitarian. We want everybody to have enough because there is enough for everyone to go around. There's enough food, shelter, there's enough money for everybody, right? That's what we want ultimately. And if we want to pursue that as a Sikh, it's going to be an incredibly difficult journey. If you want to now then, as the candidates themselves have said, if you want to be pragmatic, right? If you want to be pragmatic and you want to put your Sikhi aside for that second, then you vote for the party that's going to benefit you. And let's not get it twisted, that's what we're going to do. If I'm a businessman and I don't want to pay my employees, I'm going to vote Tory. It doesn't matter what my Sikhi says. If I'm a waged labourer, I'm going to vote for Labour. It doesn't matter what my Sikhi says, right? Because it's about being pragmatic and it's about ensuring your survival on a personal, individual basis. But Sikhi isn't about that. For us as Sikhs, we're part of the collective. For us, there is oneness, right? All of us are together, we're in this together, and as Sikhs, if we want to resolve those questions, those complex questions, if we don't want to choose between Tory or Labour, and we don't want to say, no, I'm not going to be pragmatic, I'm going to make a small choice, and that small choice is not to vote, because you're saying to the state that you don't give your consent, you're not willing to turn a blind eye, because we talk about failings of the state, right? The candidates have mentioned that the government isn't perfect. When the government fails, genocide happens. When the government fails, slavery happens. So the failings of the state are catastrophic. And as a Sikh, how far are you willing to go to turn your back on that catastrophe in order to partake in the system? And remember, not voting one day doesn't mean that you're not part of the system. We're here. We reject the social contract Rousseau talks about. We wear a kirpan, right? We take the right of policing on ourselves. I'm responsible for me and I'm responsible for other members of society. If a terrorist attack's going to happen around a Sikh, you're in a better position than the average British citizen who doesn't enjoy the same rights. A British born citizen can't wear a kirpan. Why? Because this was blessed to us by the Guru. There's a different game at play here. Padashahi, right? The Guru's given us something that the states tried to take away on many, many occasions. And we've agitated and fought that back, and we've took that back. Because why? We believe between the state and the lowest of the low, where we stand, Niche under Niche Jat, this is what Guru Nanak says, we stand with the lowest of the low, with the lowest denominator of the society. We're not willing to turn our blind eye on injustice or genocide or tyranny or oppression. And we stand as a buffer between the state and the citizen. We stand as this new dynamic of power that can show other citizens how we can live in a different way. And it's super hard. It's really difficult. But this is our challenge. This is why we're here as Sikh. Otherwise, let's just be British. Let's forget the Sikhi. Let's be British then. But we can't be British. We can't be American. One second, man. We can't be American. We can't be French, Sikh, or whatever. We're Sikh first. The Guru first, always, right? So there is, as a Sikh, there is no political engagement if you want to be a Sikh. You have to explore it outside of the state, and there's many structures to do that. And yeah, that's it, man. The failings of the state.
Don't clap that.
I think everyone's clapping because we can go home now.
We gotta survive, man.
Gotta pay a tax, man.
So
Jasmine, have the
if
fun.
you weren't able to take anything away from that, firstly, if you could please do contribute, because we are funded by a charitable organisation. On the way out, you're going to see two forms. One is about how you would vote before you came in here. The other one says how you would vote after you've heard all our speakers speak. If you could fill them out so we can get some sort of idea of whether this has had any influence on you, that would be great. Otherwise, we're still here. We're not going to count the building for another 20 minutes. So we'll chat to everyone.
I'll tell you what.
Why did you come outside?
Why did you give for the...